Welcome to Undisputed Boxing. We're here to review Canelo Alvarez beats Callum Smith in a 12-round brutal fashion. I've finished watching it this afternoon. I want to give a quick sort of shout out and thank you to everybody that listened to our preview last week. It's actually our biggest video that we've done to date. So thanks to everybody for listening and sharing the video. Okay, let's get straight into it. Rick, what did you think?
Well, it's great that that was our biggest viewing video, and it's a prediction that I got right. I said Canelo on point, so I'm having that. It was not the wildest prediction in the world. You get, I think that's probably the odds-on result. Yeah. It kind of went how I thought. I thought Smith would be a bit more competitive for longer, if I'm honest. I know he had shoulder issues, bicep issues, and I don't know how long that hampered him for, but he was still throwing. I thought he was quite competitive in the first third of the fight, and then it kind of, slipped away. And I thought he'd be competitive for longer. And I thought he might have given Canelo a couple of moments where I wouldn't say he floored him or anything, but he would have rocked him back a bit, and that never came. He didn't seem to have as much snap in his punches, Callum Smith, and he didn't use the jab as much as he probably should, and he never got the respect of Canelo. And after a while, he did what he normally does and comes forward and hunts him down. I didn't think Canelo really ever had Smith in much trouble. The last round, he did keep looking up at the clock. I don't know if that was just, I don't think he was actually hurt and about to go down. I think he just probably had enough, if I'm honest, and the shoulder and the bicep and pain probably. But, from in the second half of the fight, he was just fighting to get through it rather than to try and win. So I was a bit disappointed in the end. What was your summary?
Yeah, I was. I have to say, I was a little bit disappointed with Callum Smith. I mean, I know I predicted him to be knocked, to be stopped late. But I did think that in those first 3 or 4 rounds, he'd give Canelo some problems because he is pretty good on the inside. I thought Canelo would have problems with his jab, which he didn't really kind of get going with his jab. He didn't really utilize his jab as much. And he just kept on letting him back him up to the ropes, and Canelo just went to work on the body. And I struggled to. I think I gave Callum Smith 1 round, which was I think 5. The 5th round I gave Callum Smith, but I mean I was probably being generous at that. I thought it was a clinical performance from Canelo Alvarez, and I just think he's getting better and better. And I think we could be witnessing something so dominating that it's maybe reminiscent of Roy Jones Jr. in in the 90s, where Callum Smith is consensus #1, super middleweight #1, Ring Magazine #1 at 168, and I can't think of a boxer that has stepped up in weight and fought the consensus #1 and beat them that convincingly. And I just think, he is a true elite level fighter. He's basically made him look like he had no business being in there, which is a shame to say because I've been a big fan of Callum Smith, but he looked like he went into survival mode from round 8 or 9, and he looked like a broken man. And you can see he just wanted to get to the end of the fight and not have it stopped. But I think Joe Gallagher was probably tempted. Round 10 or 11, let's just live to fight another day. And you can see Canelo was really going for the stoppage, and he really went to work on the body. I was really impressed with Smith's heart. Like, he is tough. Like those Winston shots and those hooks into the body. He just, I mean, there have been a lot of top super middleweights that would have crumbled, rounds 9, 10, or 11.
He didn't even show a wince. Actually, I never thought for 1 minute. I don't know if it's just his poker face. He's very calm, Smith, and he doesn't really ever show him in interviews or anything really. Yeah. But every time he got hit one, you'd look at his face and you'd look at his body, and he'd move backwards, but he never looked like he was wincing and holding on.
Yeah.
So you're right. He's got some great resistance in him. But yeah, I mean, he's been consensus #1 for 3 weights now.
Yeah.
You know, he dominated 154, and then he was he undisputed there, or he won a few belts, and then
at 154 he beat Erislandy Lara, who was the consensus light middleweight champ, and then at middleweight I believe Miguel Cotto. Correct me if I'm, I might be wrong on that, but I think Miguel Cotto was the consensus #1 at middleweight. Although that was, I mean, you could argue and say that Miguel Cotto.
Triple G.
Well, yeah, Triple G, yeah. So that's probably
Triple G was consensus, and he beat him, and now he's beaten another consensus, and he was. I wouldn't say he's beaten the consensus #1 at. I'm being picky at light heavy. No, I think Kovalev was a bit past it.
Yeah,
there's a couple of the others that I think are a different ball game. And he was asked in an interview I saw afterwards. He was asked would he go up to Cruz, and he just went no way. He'll stay at these ranges and that. But it is. I think you're right. It's kind of a special talent. He's just got everything. I mean, he's skillful. He's quick. He's powerful. He's got great defense. He's got a great chin. He's got 9s in like all the departments.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He hasn't really got weakness. No. He's not big when he's like Callum, but even Callum Smith was saying he's got a great jab. His jab surprised me, the speed of it.
Yeah. It's powerful as well.
Doesn't tarnish in future years because he's not old, but he's not young. How old is he? He's late 20s still. Late 20s.
He's 30, and that was his 55th fight. I mean, I think he could go on for another 3 or 4 years. So we're probably looking at another 8 to 10 fights on his record before we start to see, a slight decline. When you look at Terence Crawford, it's going to be 34 next year, and he's probably going to have maybe another 2 or 3 fights. But clinical performance, I think probably one of his best performances to date. But I mean, obviously everybody's asking now, who do you want to see him in with next? So I mean, who would you like to see him in with next?
I mean, as a Brit, you want to see him in against Billy Joe, and Billy Joe will offer him something different. I think he'll beat Billy Joe on points. Yeah. I think Billy Joe he'll be probably a bit more competitive than Smith was, mainly because he won't be getting hit as much. I think he'll be a bit more elusive. But he hasn't got the power to worry Canelo, so he is going to spend the whole time dancing around the ring, and he's got to get fit for that. And I think in the last few rounds he'll be having to get through it. Yeah, because he'll just tire. Even moving for 10 rounds, he'll tire. Then the last 2 rounds he could get stopped towards it at the very end. But so it would be him mainly because he's a Brit. But Caleb Plant's obviously. I don't know. I just think all these fighters, he just wins and quite comfortably, probably on points. Or maybe late stoppage. I suppose if it's not Billy Joe, I'd like to see him just go for anything and fight Berbatev or someone like that. One of the kings at light heavy, and go, tell you what, if you can beat this guy, that's 4 divisions that you have reached the Everest on.
Yeah. I know, there is something I do want to kind of just see him go on now to kind of break records, and I do think we're witnessing kind of a Roy Jones Jr.-esque, Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Senior. I don't know. I think Jermall Charlo actually could potentially give him more problems than Caleb Plant. But there doesn't seem to be that many people calling for it. I don't know if it's because it's with PBC and maybe he has a problem with PBC, but I think that Jermall Charlo and Canelo is, mouth-watering fight. And, his last performance as well, would warrant. I just have a bit of a problem with like Gennady Golovkin, who I think we'll come on to that in a minute, the reviewing that fight. But against who he's just recently fought, and you could say the same about Billy Joe Saunders. He's just beaten a 38-year-old Martin Murray. Is that enough to give you the golden ticket to Canelo? Not for me. I think you've got to win a
It certainly
big
doesn't
fight.
prepare you for him.
Yeah, but you've also it's got to be warranted, and the public have got to be calling for it, going, right, we need to see this guy. I just don't think that after what Triple G did and Billy Joe did in their respective performances warrants a golden ticket to Canelo for me. But but on the Triple G fight, what did you make of that against Kamil Szeremeta?
Well, just before the fight, in terms of linking him to Canelo, I mean, again, I'd like to see the fight again, the third fight, but not before the other two that I've mentioned, probably. But there are always good fights between those two, and I suppose the only thing he's warranted getting a third shot is he got a draw in the first fight, and the second fight was close-ish. So, past performance. But I'll be honest, I don't see what changes other than probably Triple G getting a bit older. So I don't know. Though I'd like to see it, I don't know what will change and what differences we'd see. But yeah, I saw his fight, and don't know what to learn from it really. Other than that guy had a hell of a heart.
Yeah.
Kept coming back. I also did see the fight, actually. I know we were talking before. I did see the fight before it. One of the fights before it that you sent on a link. Was the Venezuelan guy who came back to knock
that was
his sparring partner out at the end.
Ali Akhmedov, who is the touted as the next Triple G at super middleweight. He fought a guy called Carlos Gongoro, which was the fight of the weekend. I've watched a lot of boxing this weekend, but that was the fight of the weekend for me.
I did see that because you sent it me on the thing. Because at first, I mean, it got better and better because at first it started off okay and it got better and better. Sorry, back to G. Yeah, I mean, the guy was tough. We didn't learn anything more about Triple G. He looked in good nick for great nick for his age. He's 38, and still got like power. But it's a bit. I'm left with a bit like, so what? I expected him to do that. If anything, I expected him to finish him early.
Yeah, I think. I mean, to going back to Triple G, I was a huge fan of Triple G for many years, and I do think that he actually won that first fight with Canelo. I thought he was. I mean, being robbed is thrown around. Maybe that would be a little bit harsh on Canelo, but the Triple G was a clear winner for me in that, and I did think that wasn't a very fair reflection on the fight. But then, obviously, the rematch. I think Canelo. You could argue. I actually had it a draw, but I think you could argue either way that Canelo won that rematch. But I do think that since then, I think the decline of Triple G has been visible, and I think against Derevyanchenko, he was quite lucky to win that, and he's had a couple of gimme fights against Steve Rolls and this one on Friday, and I actually think he looks a little bit slower. I think he looks a little bit slower. He's almost like lost a sort of a yard of pace. And I think that Canelo has got a lot better. I think he's gone up a couple of levels. And I think that to say that it wouldn't be very competitive might be a little bit unfair. But it's just, he's 38 years old and he had a huge, amateur career as well, like 250, 300 odd fights. So he's just got too many miles on the clock now. But I actually do think that we will see Triple G and Canelo in Cinco de Mayo in May, is what I'm sort of reading, and then Billy Joe Saunders against Demetrius Andrade is going to be February-March time, and then the winner of that will get the Canelo fight in September. I think it's already that sounds like it's predetermined. That's what's going to happen.
All on DAZN.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll all be all on DAZN. So they look like they've got it pretty wrapped up at the moment for Canelo. But yeah, that just to touch on that other fight, the Ali Akhmedov versus Carlos Gongoro. I'd seen a little bit of Ali Akhmedov only because I was a huge Triple G fan, and I think Abel Sanchez was training this guy as well, and he looked like a huge puncher, great technique, big, Olympic and amateur background as well. And actually, the first 3 or 4 rounds, it didn't look like it was. It looked like a bit of an unfair fight, but fair play to Gongoro. He got granite chin, came back, and stopped him. It was unbelievable. So he stopped him in the last round, didn't he? The 12th round.
Yeah, it's. Do you know what? You get those fighters sometimes that come along and they believe in their hype, their billing, and they're not prepared mentally and physically for when someone take their power.
Yeah.
And I mean, you could say Joshua has had a little bit of that, but what it does mentally is it's kind of damn, in the middle of a fight and I've thrown everything. This usually works. It doesn't. And then there's also the physical side, which is I've got to do 12 rounds now. Yeah. I don't think the guy had ever done 12 rounds. And he'd gone out.
You might be right.
Say again.
Yeah, you might be right. I don't think he'd done 12 rounds before. So yeah, that was obviously the acid test.
Because I do remember he seemed to have a really good knockout record, right. and he has gone the distance. It may have not been 12, may have been 8 or 6 or something. So he looked knackered. He was taking more and more damage, but he seemed to be knocked out more through exhaustion. It reminded me a bit of Tony Bellew when he got done, knocked out by Usyk. So half of it's the punch and the power, but half of it's the exhaustion. There's just no, you can't take that kind of that power anymore. If you take it in the first round, you can ride it. And I think it was as much as he didn't have it in the tank. In that last round, it was almost a round too quick because I think he was still potentially up on the scorecards until that, or it was very close on the scorecard up until that final round. And he looked, bad knockout as well. He was down for a while. Yeah.
It will take hype train, Kazakhstan hype train derailed. So it'll be interesting to see see how he comes back.
Yeah, I always get question marks when I hear the next so and so. You know what I mean?
I know, yeah. It's so difficult to get right, In fact, when we do the awards, I want to try and do a bit of a thing on like who to watch out for next year. I've got a couple of good ones in mind that we can talk about that next week. But okay. I think that was that's pretty much it then. Was there any other fights that you saw?
No, it was those main two, and the one that you sent me on the Triple G undercard. I did see one of the undercard fights. The one before the Canelo, it was only a 4-round. I can't remember the guy's name. I think you
Mark Castro
mentioned him before we did. Yeah, 4-round. I don't think it went 4-round though. I think he got finished. So I saw that because for me, both fights were like 4 a.m. So,
yeah.
Not a great. Not going to get up at 2 and watch a full undercard unless there's some real action going on.
Dedication.
You saw. Didn't you?
Yeah, so Gilberto Ramirez, I've just watched against Alfonso Lopez. I mean, it's obviously almost kind of a comeback fight because everybody's been laid off for a year. But I've been a big fan of Gilberto Ramirez, Southpaw Mexican, former WBO super middleweight champ. He stepped up to light heavy a few years ago. I think he stopped Alfonso Lopez in round 10. He dropped him early on as well. I mean, it's another fight worth watching. Actually, it was a really, really good fight. He's got great technique, great feet, pivots and angles, and he was catching. Lopez. I mean, Lopez is pretty weathered now, but he's got some snap in his punches as well. Even though he stepped up to light heavy, I think he could be a real. He could be a real force at light heavyweight. I mean, there's a lot of monsters at light heavyweight. But I think because he was champion with WBO, I think he's now in line to fight Joe Smith Jr. for the vacant belt because obviously Canelo vacated after beating Kovalev. So I think it's now vacant.
What belt did he just win then? It wasn't a world title fight then?
It was, I think it was like NABF or something like that. It was kind of an unknown. It's not a recognized title.
But it sounds like one of the national titles, that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
or continental, one of the continental ones, North American something.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But yeah, no, I'll be very excited to see what he does next year. He's actually 41-0 now, and he's only 28-29. So he could very easily get to like 50-0. That magic 50-0.
What I mean, it's obviously hot enough. We've got a few. Well, we did have 2 decent horses, but one got beat recently. We don't know how good he was really, as in yard. But we've obviously got Buatsi coming through, and he's probably a few fights off that level yet. But there's talk of Callum Smith stepping up to light heavy. How do you think he fares?
I don't know. I think he's got the skills. I don't know. I'm not sure if he's going to carry on. Something tells me that he'd have got a big payday out of that, and the natural thing is to move up to light heavyweight. But I think he's 31 now. Is he 30, 31? There's absolute monsters at light heavyweight, and I just don't think he's going to want that smoke. There's Artur Beterbiev, who is probably the consensus number 1. He's just beating Gvozdyk. He actually just retired Gvozdyk. And then you've got Dmitry Bivol. Obviously Kovalev is still around. I think he's good enough to win a title, potentially. But he'll probably have to have a couple of gimme fights at light heavy to kind of grow into the weight. But there's some real, big guys coming through as well at the light heavyweight scene from Russia and Uzbekistan, and I don't know. I just think maybe he might just. I mean, he could retire, and not have to work again, Callum Smith. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if he does step up and carry on.
Yeah, you've mentioned that before actually, and I think you're right. I mean, he mentioned about this is natural, but he said after the fight, I've missed my little girl so much, but he made a real point of it, and I know he's had a little girl recently, and I just wonder if he's just like, what, I've earned a lot of money, I've got a family now, but then it depends if the fighting calls out, because 31 is still doable, and you got to think as well. There's some decent options for him. There's whatever happens, he's got to have a bit of a give me fight, like you said, probably first half of next year. End of the first half of next year at the weight, and then he could because of his status, he could probably get a world title fight in his second fight. So he doesn't have to spend that much time longer in the sport. Or if not, him and Buatsi at the back end of next year could do a big pay-per-view. And it may be for a title, maybe not, but it wouldn't have to be. I think that fight could do pay-per-view next year, back end of next year, without a title.
Yeah.
I'm not talking Anthony Joshua pay-per-view numbers, but I'm talking Dillian White. You know what I mean? So it's a good, it's a good payday, and they'll both probably fancy it. And the winner of that will definitely get a title fight. So it's I don't know. It just seems it's not like he's looking up at it going, "No, it's a bit barren." That there's not much fun in that, or you know what I mean? It's a challenging one, but there's options. There's money fights and there's title fights. Both are quite tough. Yeah.
So we'll see. I would personally love to see him carry on, because I think it'll be a great addition to the light heavyweight scene. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, the only other fight I did see was Frank Sanchez, the heavyweight, which I was really surprised at, because I know that he's a PBC fighter. So I was interested to see what he was doing on a DAZN card, whether they just wanted to give him a run out. Yeah, he's going to be quite an interesting addition to the heavyweight scene. I think he's now 16 or 17-0. He beat a guy called something Fernandez. I think it was just kind of a tick-over fight. But it'd be interesting to see if they
What's his best win?
I don't recognise anybody on his record. And another thing that I saw was quite interesting on BoxRec, it says that he's 28, and he does not look 28. I think he's
another Ortiz.
I think he must be like mid-30s. But yeah, he'll be an interesting addition. He looks heavy-handed, But I think I'm going to reserve judgment until he fights somebody of note. But he looks pretty wild as well. He looks he's in swinging and he's open. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe he'd have a different tactics against somebody who's, you know, top 15, top 20. Yeah.
And Hunter fought. Well, I didn't see the fight. I think that was a tick over.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. Yeah. I haven't
seen
seen that. But yeah. Yeah. All right, cool.
Okay.
All right, let's wrap it up. All right, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe.